because I was the loudest voice in the room. Not because I had the most opinions about how things should go, but because I was the one who actually answered the phone at 2 in the morning, drove 3 hours without being asked, and handed over my debit card like it was nothing. Because to me, back then, it wasn't nothing, it was love. I just didn't know yet that love wasn't what was being handed back. My brother and I grew up in the same house, shared the same second-hand couch, ate the same boxed mac and cheese 3 nights a week when money got thin. We were close the way kids get close when the world outside the front door doesn't always make sense. You hold on to each other because there isn't much else to hold on to. He was 2 years younger than me, and for most of my childhood, that meant I was the one who walked him to school, the one who helped him with homework I barely understood myself, the one who told him he was going to be fine even when I wasn't sure either of us would be. I started working at 17, hostess at a chain restaurant, then a second job at a dry cleaner on weekends. I paid for my own junior prom dress. I saved for my own used car. When I got into a 4-year university 2 states away, I took out loans and worked 25 hours a week on top of a full class schedule. Nobody handed me a roadmap. I figured it out because figuring it out was the only option on the table. My brother was different. Not worse. Just different. He had a way of moving through the world like he assumed things would work out, and somehow they usually did, because people around him, including me, made sure they did. He was charming and funny and genuinely easy to root for. When he got into a good school closer to home, the whole family celebrated like he'd split the atom. I flew back for his going-away dinner. I gave him a card with $300 in it that I didn't fully have. I told him I was proud of him. I meant it. What I didn't realize was that I had just set a precedent. Over the next 4 years, I became the person he called when he came up short. $50 here, $200 there. When his laptop died junior year, I put a refurbished one on my credit card and told him to pay me back whenever. He never did, and I never pushed. When he needed a security deposit for an off-campus apartment, I lent him $800. He Venmo requested me the first month like clockwork and then went quiet. I let it go. That's what you do for family, I told myself. That's what the older sibling does. By the time he graduated, I had quietly absorbed somewhere close to $6,000 in loans that had calcified into gifts through sheer inaction. My own savings account looked the way it looked because I had spent 4 years prioritizing someone else's stability over my own. I had a 2019 Civic with a crack in the windshield I kept meaning to fix. I was still on a payment plan for a dental crown from 2 years prior. I didn't resent him for any of it. I want to be honest about that. I genuinely didn't. I just kept moving forward and assumed the math would eventually even out. It didn't even out. He graduated on a Saturday in May. I had bought my plane ticket 4 months in advance, booked a hotel room 2 blocks from the venue, and arranged to take Friday and Monday off work. I had also, because his girlfriend at the time mentioned he didn't have anything nice to wear for the ceremony and the dinner afterward, ordered him a dress shirt and chinos from a brand I knew he liked, had them shipped directly to his apartment, and texted him to let him know they were coming. He sent back a thumbs up emoji. I screenshotted and smiled at it like an idiot. The Thursday before I was supposed to fly out, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my brother. Not a call, a text. Hey, so things are kind of weird right now with the group, and I think it might be better if you didn't come to the actual ceremony. You can still do dinner Saturday night if you want, but the seats are limited and honestly, it's been kind of tense. Hope you understand. I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on my kitchen counter and stood there for a while. I want to describe what that moment felt like, but I'm not sure I have the exact words for it even now. It wasn't rage, not at first. It was more like the sensation of a floor dropping out from under you when you didn't know you were standing on something unstable. I had a flight booked. I had a hotel room. I had taken days off work. I had sent him clothes to wear to the thing he was now asking me not to attend. And the reason? The seats are limited, and it's been kind of tense. Was so thin, so completely weightless that I almost laughed. I didn't laugh. I picked my phone back up. I asked one question. Is this coming from you or from Nina? Nina was his girlfriend of 2 years. I had met her twice. Both times she had been perfectly pleasant to my face and perfectly vague in a way that I could never quite pin down. My brother had mentioned, more than once, that she found big family gatherings overwhelming, that she preferred things to stay small and calm. I had taken that at face value. I was trying to be respectful. I wasn't trying to wedge myself into their relationship. He took 45 minutes to respond. It's a joint decision, please just respect it. I put the phone down again. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up my travel bookings and looked at everything in front of me. The flight, non-refundable. The hotel, refundable until midnight if I cancelled now. The days off work, already approved, I could keep them or cancel them either way. The dress shirt and chinos I'd sent him, delivered, presumably worn, not coming back. I thought about what I wanted to do. I thought about the $800 security deposit that never came back, the laptop, the $300 in the going away card, the smaller amounts over smaller moments that had stacked up so quietly I'd stopped counting. And then I thought about something else, something I had been sitting on for 3 weeks without knowing what to do with it. 2 months earlier, my brother's college roommate had reached out to me through Instagram. We had met once at a family weekend sophomore year. Briefly, but I barely remembered him. His message was awkward and clearly difficult to write. He said he'd been going back and forth about whether to say anything. He said he thought I should know that Nina had been seeing someone else, not casually but consistently, for most of the past year. He had seen things. He wasn't trying to blow up my brother's relationship. He just thought someone who cared about my brother ought to know. He sent me 2 screenshots to back it up. I had been sitting on those screenshots for 3 weeks. I had gone back and forth so many times about whether to say something, how to say it, whether it was my place. I loved my brother. I didn't want to blow up his life. I kept telling myself I would find the right moment, the right approach, the right version of this conversation that wouldn't end with him shooting the messenger. I had been waiting for the right moment. He had just texted me to stay home from his graduation. I sat with that for about 10 minutes. Then I forwarded the screenshots to my brother with no caption, no explanation, no softening. Just the images, just the evidence. And a single line underneath. I was going to find the right time to tell you. Turns out you picked it for me. After that, I called the hotel and cancelled my room before midnight. Saved myself $162. I kept the days off work. I used them to drive to the coast with a friend who had been asking me to visit for 6 months. We ate seafood and watched bad movies, and I didn't look at my phone for most of it. My brother did not text me back that night. He called me at 7 a.m. the next morning. I was still asleep. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that one go too. At 8:15 I listened to the voicemails. In the first one he was angry. His voice was doing that tight, controlled thing it does when he's trying not to yell. In the second one, 6 minutes later, he was not controlled at all. Apparently Nina had denied everything immediately, and then when he pressed her on the screenshots had stopped denying and started explaining. The explanation had taken most of the night. He was devastated. He was at his roommate's place. The graduation dinner, the one I had been cordially invited to attend as a consolation prize, was, naturally, no longer happening. He wanted to know why I hadn't told him sooner. I called him back. I told him the truth. That I had been trying to find the right moment. That I hadn't wanted to be the one to detonate his life. That I had genuinely wrestled with it and kept putting it off. Because I loved him, and I didn't know how to do it without destroying something. I told him I was sorry I hadn't done it sooner. I meant that part. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Why did you cancel the hotel?" And I said, "Because you told me not to come." He said he didn't think I'd actually cancel. He said he thought I'd just show up anyway, the way I always did. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "That's not something I'm going to do anymore." He didn't know what to say to that. I'm not sure I did either entirely, But I meant it in a way that went beyond graduation weekend. I meant it in the larger sense. The showing up at any cost, the absorbing the bill, the keeping quiet because it's easier sense. I had spent years making myself small enough that nobody would notice how much I was actually carrying. The problem with that is that eventually you notice, and once you notice you can't unnotice it. The weeks after graduation were strange. My brother had a lot going on. The breakup, moving out of the apartment he'd shared with Nina, starting a new job. And I gave him space for most of it. We texted occasionally, careful, polite texts, the kind you send when you're both aware that something shifted but neither of you is ready to name it out loud. My parents called me about 3 weeks later, not to check on me exactly, more to relay that my brother was going through a hard time and that they hoped I understood that the graduation situation had been stressful for everyone, and that family needed to pull together right now. My mom used the word everyone in a way that made it clear she meant you specifically. I asked her, as neutrally as I could manage, whether she knew how much money I had lent my brother over the past 4 years. She said she assumed I had helped out here and there, but that it wasn't really about money. I agreed that it wasn't about money. I said it was about being told not to come to my own brother's graduation ceremony, after I'd already booked my flight, and that I was still working through that. She went quiet in a way that told me she hadn't actually known about the text. My brother apparently had not mentioned that part. I didn't push it. I told her I loved her and I loved him and I wasn't going anywhere. I just needed a little more time than usual. She said okay in a way that wasn't totally convinced but wasn't combative either. We hung up. I sat on my couch afterward and thought about who I was before I started reflexively absorbing everyone else's problems. I could picture her. This earlier version of me, 17 and working a hostess shift on a Friday night, counting out tip money on the seat of her car before driving home. She was tired but she was building something. She had a very clear picture of what she was working toward and it was hers. Somewhere along the way I had taken that same energy and redirected it entirely outward. Not because anyone forced me to. Because I loved people and I wanted to show it, and because showing it in ways that cost me something felt more meaningful than the alternative. The thing is, it also cost me something. My brother came to visit about 2 months after graduation. He drove up on a Saturday and we went to lunch at a diner near my apartment, and it was awkward for the first 40 minutes in the way that things are awkward when you haven't quite cleared the air, but you're both pretending you have. Then something shifted over coffee. I don't even remember what we were talking about. And he looked at me and said, "I didn't realize how much I'd been leaning on you." I said, "I know you didn't." He said, "I want to pay you back. Actually pay you back. I just need to figure out how." I told him I wasn't keeping score, which was mostly true. And then I told him that what I actually needed wasn't the money. It was for him to see me as a person and not a backup plan. He looked like that landed somewhere it needed to land. We sat there for a while after that, just drinking our coffee, and it reminded me of being kids on the same second-hand couch, the closeness that doesn't need to perform itself, that just exists in the silence between two people who know each other well enough to stop pretending. I'm not saying everything got fixed over diner coffee. It didn't. There are dynamics in families that take years to untangle, and some of them you never fully do, but something real happened in that conversation. Something I had stopped expecting to happen. Because I had gotten so used to going without it. The hotel refund came through the following Tuesday, $162, back in my account. I used it to fix the crack in my windshield. It felt, and I know this might sound small, like the beginning of something. There's a version of this story where I stay quiet, where I swallow the text, show up to the dinner I was graciously permitted to attend, and hand over the rest of the money with a smile because that's what I always did. I know that version well. I had been living it for years. What I didn't understand for a long time is that staying quiet isn't the same as being good. I thought it was. I confused the two so completely that they blurred into one thing. This idea that love meant making yourself smaller so other people could take up more space. That being the reliable one, the one who never asked for anything back, was a form of character. Maybe it was in some limited sense. But character without clarity is just a slow drain. You can be generous and still be taken for granted. You can be patient and still be teaching people that your time costs nothing. The money I lent my brother over 4 years, the laptop, the deposit, the card with the $300 I didn't fully have, none of it was the real issue. The real issue was that I had made a habit of showing up so consistently, so quietly, that I had effectively communicated that there were no limits, that I would absorb whatever needed absorbing, that the cost of belonging in this family was silence about what it was costing me. When his text came in that Thursday, something clarified in a way I hadn't expected. Not rage. Not even hurt exactly. Just clarity. Like a fog lifting. I had been waiting for the right moment to tell him about Nina for 3 weeks because I was protecting him. Or trying to. I was still, even then, prioritizing his comfort over the truth, and he had just told me, without realizing it, that the consideration wasn't mutual. That was information. I decided to use it. 4 in those screenshots wasn't cruelty. It was honesty, finally arriving on an honest timeline. He needed to know. I had known that for weeks. What changed was that I stopped needing the moment to be perfect before I acted on what I already understood to be true. That, I think, is the thing I'm still learning to trust in myself. The part that already knows, that has already processed the evidence, that doesn't need to wait for permission to speak plainly. The diner conversation, 2 months later, mattered more to me than the graduation drama ever did. Not because he apologized. He did in his way, but because something honest finally passed between us. He saw me, not as the backup plan, not as the one who would handle it, but as a person who had been carrying something heavy and had quietly set it down. That kind of recognition doesn't come from demanding it. It comes from being willing to stop performing the role that was making you invisible in the first place. I think about the crack in my windshield a lot. 2 years I drove with it, telling myself I'd get to it when things settled. The $162 from the hotel refund fixed it in 40 minutes. It was never about the money. It was about having absorbed the habit of putting myself last so thoroughly that I stopped noticing I was doing it. The moment I stopped, the moment I said, that's not something I'm going to do anymore, the resources were already there. They had always been there, I had just been directing them somewhere else. That's the part I'd want anyone in a similar position to sit with. Not the revenge, not the cancelled plans, not the text messages. The part where you realize that how you treat your own time, your own money, your own presence, that teaches people how to treat it too. Not because people are calculating or cruel, sometimes just because you never showed them there was another option. I'm still learning, the windshield is fixed, that's enough for now.